So I'm going to ask you. My first question is this: Is there if there's a beginning with a work with people in networks, where can we start to tell a story about Africa?
No, but I would like to understand your question. Is it in relation to Yapala or what?
No, about Africa and the work with networks in Africa. It's not.
Oh.
It's not necessarily. It's not related
okay.
with Yapala.
Oh, you mean civil society organizations in
Exactly.
Africa?
It's exactly.
Yeah, but I think it's in the 90s. Actually, I think it began in the mid 80s to the early 90s. And it began with the struggle against structural adjustment programs imposed by the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. So trade unions, women's organizations, NGOs came together to oppose structural adjustment policies, especially in the 90s. And then we got involved in the Jubilee movement against external debt of Africa. So I think the external debt was really the great thing that mobilized many organizations in Africa. And then the World Trade Organization came in. And then we got involved in World Social Movement with the birth of the World Social Forum in 2001. And then, of course, we expanded. New organizations came into the struggle. And we formed the African Social Forum in 2002 in Mali. And then we kept getting different organizations from different parts of the continent, rural organizations, urban organizations, women's organizations, youth organizations, research institutions like Third World Forum, Samira means Third World Forum, Codesria and other institutions. So really, I think it started in the mid-80s against IMF World Bank policies called structural adjustment programs. But the momentum came in the 90s when the Jubilee debt movement was born, and it brought together all the different movements. So from then we got that big movement that led us to the World Social Forum. Yeah.
What does it mean for African organizations and for Africa, this civil organizations work? I mean, what's the difference? What's the main difference between a person that works in civil organization movements in Africa from other who work the same, I don't know, maybe the same area or the same struggle in Latin America, for example, or in Asia?
I think the realities are different. Even if we face same problems, the realities are different. I know IMF World Bank had the structural adjustments in Asia, in Latin America, like in Africa, but the reaction to these programs was different. I think Africa started a bit later than Asia and Latin America. And even in Africa, it began in some countries in West Africa, in Southern Africa, but in Central Africa, they joined the movement later. So I think the realities are different, and the political situation also is different. I think the struggles in Latin America and Asia were much more ahead of what was going on in Africa. and that's why they started earlier than us, and they had greater mobilization than in Africa. So that's, I think, another difference. And the last difference, maybe it's Africa, it's a very huge continent. A very huge continent. Communications between countries are very difficult. And it's only when we put together the African Social Forum that we began to come together as an African movement. But before that, we had movements in some specific countries, in some regions. But we got really an African movement when we set up the African Social Movement Forum.
Which can we say would be the most mature African social movements today? I mean, which has a more long way of work? Which are the most experimented social movements in Africa?
Look, I think social movements in Africa, really the strongest, from my standpoint, are in Southern Africa because of struggle, anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa, and the liberation movements in Zimbabwe and in Zambia, Mozambique, Angola, etc. The movement is stronger there. They can mobilize better than anyone else. Then I think West Africa. In West Africa, I can say we have some very good experience. Senegal, Mali, Ghana, Nigeria. These are some of the countries where you have more or less strong social movements that have been involved in the struggle against IMF World Bank policies on the one hand, and the debt issue on the other hand. Central Africa still, they have joined the movement, but still a weak link in the African movement. North Africa, over the last 2 years, North Africa came on strong with all the popular uprisings that are taking place there. But to keep it short, I think Southern Africa is really the lead, in my opinion, in terms of mobilization and greater organizational skills. Yes.
Demba, thank you very much.